Wow, it's happening. Ravi, glass of water, please. I'm ready.
Life Bridge presents KC Life Talks, Life and Leadership Lessons.
With faith in God and the vision God has given me, and the rich experience that I have gained so far, and a solid biblical theological education as a 26-year-old, here I am back in India. Life has taken a complete turnaround now to a place where I never thought I will ever come back again when I left India. And for me, it was very exciting to be given this opportunity to work with Dr. Titus, a man who is very highly regarded as an apostolic leader, an educator, a pastoral heart, a man who have a vision for India. And so it was exciting to have been given this opportunity to work in the seminary now, as he has promised me, to work the ladder up and grow into the leadership positions that he had already promised me. But, there was a lot of positive expectations. The challenge was on me to deliver and to contribute to the growth of the seminary. And God, by His grace, have enabled me to work with Him for 8 years with total commitment and with full efforts. As I returned to India, one of my desire and the dream was to get married. So that I can be more effective in ministry together with a life partner. God worked and used Dr. Titus once again to find a beautiful wife for me. And as God providentially arranged and orchestrated that encounter with Usha, and we had the opportunity to share my life vision and the dream with her, this girl, without ever questioning about my father or the issues of my past, embraced and accepted me as I am. There was also a confirmation that God is now with me and He is leading me, because that was one of the demands I put before God, and as I decided to return back to India, that He will bring a woman who will accept me as I am, not because of the father or the issues that I had in my life previously. So God knit us together as a couple as soon as I returned back to India, and I got involved in the work culture of Dr. Titus and the ministry. And the early part of my marital life, I have failed miserably as a husband, as I was fully engaged from morning 8 a.m. to night 10:30, working in the campus to build the seminary, to serve the student community and the faculty, and to expand the ministry of this campus. All this while, my wife Usha was a silent sufferer, without complaining or without even telling me what she was going through during this tenure. But in the process, God has blessed us with a beautiful daughter, was born in the city of Visakhapatnam while we were serving God with my uncle. And God was using me in the area of teaching, administration, and God was opening doors for me as a convention speaker in various places in the state of Andhra Pradesh. And God was really beginning to bless me, and there was an opportunity to blossom the gifts that God has given to me in the area of calling and gifting within my own life. But at the same time, there was also challenges and pressures that came along. There was issues and the conflicts in the campus that we had to resolve. As a result of that, I had to take a certain stand in support of the management, or to stand with certain principles which often made me to be a taskmaster or a disciplinarian to keep the student body motivated to complete their goal. As a result of that, I was nicknamed at times as Saddam Hussein or Hitler or Lion and so forth. Students used to nickname me. Many of my students initially could not understand why I was being so rigid and so strict. But later on in life, many of them have come back to me and appreciated for the way in which I have disciplined them and engraved into them a lifestyle of focus and purpose that they need to have to become a leader. But of course, I also recognize now, looking back, that I lacked the pastoral experience or the ministry of being a pastor before I became a professor. So here I am, an armchair theologian, basically trying to download to the potential pastoral leaders how to do ministry. And that was a little bit of a failure on my part, and I recognized that. But God still used my availability and the willingness to serve in shaping well over 800 students during my time with Dr. Titus. So in the year 2000 and 2001, there was a decision that Dr. Titus had to make to ask me to leave the campus and the ministry, and he asked me to move on with my life with great regret, without really giving me much other options or hope. Basically, with no money, with no hope, I was again back to zero. I was literally thrown out, and I was literally on the streets in Visakhapatnam. I was asked to vacate the campus within a matter of a week, and by God's grace, I was able to vacate the campus within 3 days without resisting or without causing a retaliation or doing anything against my uncle, with apologies extended to both uncle and auntie for anything that I may have done wrong. Myself and my wife, with prayer, we walked out of that campus and we rented an apartment in Visakhapatnam. And we waited on God for 6 months. God, what do you want us to do? I was discouraged once again. The devil was whispering in my ears again lies that I am not good enough, and the lies that nobody needs you or nobody really loves you. Look what your uncle have done to you. And so the experiences and the pain of rejection was once again coming back to haunt me for the second time. But on another side, God by the Holy Spirit was ministering through my wife and to me, confirming that it is God who called me, not a man, not an organization. And so my wife continued to encourage me that I should trust God and put my hope in Him and not in a person or people or an organization. That was a big learning curve for me, a lesson that God was teaching me through my wife and also through some of my friends that God has brought along in my life at that time. But during that time, my brother Josie Chaco have established a mission ministry here in northern India that was also making its progress and growth. And seeing that I'm free now, Josie called me and said, why don't you come to North India? Here is this wonderful mission field, the open doors, there's hardly any competition for anyone. There's great need for leadership, great need for teachers like you to come and work in North India. I made an explorative trip to Chandigarh city here in North India where my brother started his work, and immediately there was a confirmation in my heart as I was traveling here on the train, as my wife was fasting and praying with my daughter in this little apartment in Visakhapatnam, that we are to go to northern India. This was already confirmed to us in a supernatural way several months ago through God's people, that I would indeed be on a truck with all my belongings traveling to a faraway place. Little did I know that thus prophecies spoken to me by 4 or 5 of my friends as they prayed for me have now come true. So nothing in our lives that happens without the knowledge of God, without the hand of God. God is always in control, orchestrating things in our lives. And so God used people to affirm to me the hand of God, weaving through these pathways in my life. In 2001, with my wife, my daughter who is 4 years old, my wife who is pregnant, we land here in Chandigarh with very little money and began a whole new life in this new environment. When we landed here, we couldn't speak Hindi. We have a new culture, new language, new environment to settle in. But we thank God for the base that God has given us through my brother's organization to lay our groundwork here in the initial days. Initially, the agreement or the understanding that I had with my brother was that we would work in more or less a partnership basis where I will have the opportunity to shine in the areas of my gifts and my calling. But unfortunately, that did not happen. As I began to work with him, I was more tasked with mundane jobs such as repairing the vehicles of the office or administrative work in the office or managing the office. I don't mind doing those, but then that was not the calling. That was not the primary gifting God has given me. So after working with my brother for over 3.5 years, things were not really going well in terms of maximizing my effectiveness, and that have caused a little bit of ill feelings between me and my brother, and some misunderstandings have crept in. And as a result of that, my brother Josie took the initiative to tell me, James, you will do well to do something on your own, and it is time for us to part our ways. So once again, here I am, almost like feeling of rejection, that coming back again for the third time, and being challenged with this whole question of not able to break free from my commitment or my addiction to work under a man or dependency on a man or an organization. And my wife again reminded me, James, God always wants you to trust Him, not your people, not your family, not your organization. God wants you to trust Him. And so, having been pushed to the extent of these kind of rejections now from my childhood, from my uncle, from my brother, God was now prompting me to take a radical step of faith. And what God spoke to me and my wife was to step out in water. You take the first step and begin to walk on water. And God said, I will show you the next path. I will show you how to take you forward if you are willing to do that. We moved into a single bedroom apartment in Panchkula here in Haryana state, very close to Chandigarh, and began a new phase of our life and ministry. It was a total faith, total dependence upon God with very little resources. And by then David was also growing older, and we need to send the kids to school, and we need to see God begin to open the door for us. But somehow, looking back, I don't know how God provided for us, where the money came. Friends, if you remain faithful to God and trust in the one who called you, He is always able to provide you. He is always faithful, because He is not debtor to you. He is not debtor to anyone either. And God will always remain faithful to those who are sincere in their hearts and remain faithful to Him. And that's my experience of that transition experience. But as far as ministry is concerned, I had to make a step of faith to begin to utilize the gifts God has given me. Initially, I told my wife, I want to teach the pastors. I realized that more than 85% of pastors here in northern India have no formal theological training. They do not have the Bible school backgrounds to do the work of the ministry. So I started traveling to places like Gurdaspur, Firozpur, Pathankot. I started traveling to many of these places in and around Punjab, and certain places in Haryana, and certain places in Himachal Pradesh. Gather a small group of pastors, and I started training these men. God also gave a vision for my wife. With very little resources we had, to start small home-based children's homes to care for needy children, because I realized there were many children like me who have fathers who had mental abnormalities, or fathers that have walked away from them. And so we started children's home ministry, and I started training pastors. And slowly, as we stepped into the water and begin to walk on water, we began to see God supernaturally open doors of financial provisions to do ministry in a greater way, bigger way. And within the 5 to 6 years of that walk, I found myself traveling almost 8 states here in northern India throughout the year, staying busy. All this while I was with my brother, God has also given me an opportunity to pioneer a church in the city with my wife. We started the church in the city of Chandigarh called City Light, and God has helped us to get that off the ground. But as we left the organization, we also left that church for it to run itself. And for almost over a year, we remained without going to any church, so that this church will move forward and will not move with where we are going or what we will be doing. And so Now I have a pastoral experience, a little bit of pastoral experience of having started a church, training pastors, learning the language of Hindi. We were really expanding and growing in the region of North India. That vision of training pastors here in North India have really started giving me a burden for the neighboring nations, that the same training can be expanded across not only North India but around the neighboring nations. And so God helped us to take this training to Pakistan and to Nepal. And we had the first Tri-Nation Summit where we were able to bring leaders, apostolic leaders from Pakistan, from Nepal, from India, and have a Tri-Nation Summit in Kathmandu, Nepal almost 10 years ago. That Tri-Nation Summit of apostolic leaders coming together every year have resulted in growing that ministry and expanding that now across the entire SAARC nations except Maldives. Today, we have well over a network of 45 apostolic top-level leaders that are working in partnership in ministry with what God is doing through our network of ministries. And people of God, mission agencies and ministries have come alongside to partner with us to expand this work. And so God has continued to use us to build that ministry. But about 10 years ago, while this ministry was going along the way, God began to speak to my heart about how the city of Chandigarh was a strategic city that needed to be born for Jesus Christ. So God gave me a vision. As I was reading a book written by Peter Wagner, there is a statement that really struck my mind, and in which he says, unless you win the city for the Lord, you cannot reach the region for the Lord. So as I was passionate for North India and the northwestern frontier of mission field, God began to put a burden once again for the city of Chandigarh, because the city of Chandigarh is the gateway to northwestern part of India. And so once again, God ignited the passion to plant a new church in the city. And so 10 years ago, we started a new church plant called Life Bridge. Today, God has blessed us to baptize well over 200 people in this church. God has really helped us to train many leaders that are now serving God in many parts of India, and many of our church families have migrated to many parts of the world, serving God in many countries as well. So God has expanded this work. God has blessed my family. God has blessed my daughter to become a scientist who is now working full-time and serving God. My son, who is a passionate young worshiper who loves to play the guitar, likes to be involved in the creative ministry of the church, and is supporting me in the ministry. Truly, the Lord has done this, as the psalmist says, and it is beautiful in our eyes. Only God can do something like this. To take a boy from a street, a village that you will not even recognize on Google Maps. Only God can do this. To take a young man who was hopeless, who had no destiny, no future, tagged by the community, feeling depressed and discouragement, on the verge of committing suicide, to be taken out from that place, to be established on the solid rock of Jesus Christ, to have been given a purpose in life and fulfilling the plan and purpose that God has given to his life. And that is my life. That is how God has brought me to this place where I am able to share this story with you, with the hope that this story will truly speak to your heart. And you too will see the love of God. You too will see the purpose of God in your life. You too will see the plan of God in your life, and how He can raise you up into a position of influence and impact for the kingdom of God.